to being a musician, a YouTuber, and running a recording studio, I've learned that there are many different ways to spend your money. Over the years, I've been sucked down all of the wormholes, starting of course with drums and cymbals, but quickly progressing to soundproofing, cameras, lenses, microphones, computers, interfaces, cables. It is truly a never-ending process. But as you start to build up your arsenal of gear, no matter how much money you've spent, you sometimes will find gaps in your setup or things that you just forgot about. Like spending a ton of money on new camera gear and forgetting that you have 5-year-old SD cards that are falling apart, or buying a really nice computer and using a super cheap keyboard, or spending thousands of dollars on soundproofing a room and totally neglecting sound treatment. Very guilty on that last one. Well, I have to admit that I found another one of these gaps in my studio setup, and it's speakers. For the last 2 years, I've been mixing on iMac speakers, which is far from ideal in any professional studio setting, but it's the truth, and I gotta own up to it. A little bit more on that later. So when Kef approached me about making a video on their hi-fi speakers, I was really excited because this is literally an entire category within the audio world that I've neglected for way too long. Kef is a brand that's been in business for over 60 years, and I'm super excited to try out some of their brand new models right here in my studio and in my home. Now here's the funny part about this video. When Kef first emailed me, they offered to send me 4 different pairs of speakers, and I said absolutely, let's do it. And I wrote them a whole outline of what I thought this video would look like and what I wanted to do with these 4 speakers. And after I sent that email, I realized that Kef was offering me a choice out of that list of 4. They were only offering 1 set of speakers, so I had to write a very awkward apology email. But lucky for me, Kef actually loved the video idea, and they agreed to send me all 4 pairs of speakers so I can make the video that I had pitched to them. That's what this video is. And while 3 of the 4 sets of speakers that we're talking about today are going back home to live with Kef, I'm still really excited to give all of them a test drive in a few different settings. So I'm not only going to try these out as studio monitors, like near-field monitors in the studio on my mixing desk, but I'm also going to try these speakers out in different places around my home where I might actually use them if I owned all 4 of these pairs of speakers. So here's the 4 models that we're covering today. We've got the Q350 bookshelf speakers in European walnut. Now these are passive speakers, meaning they require an amplifier, but the reviews online tell me that these are some of the best valued hi-fi speakers that you can buy for under $1,000. We'll see how that claim holds up in today's video. Next, we have the LS50 Metas in cobalt blue. These are compact loudspeakers designed around Kef's Meta material, which is a special material used inside the driver array that reduces coloration and distortion. Now these are also passive speakers which require an amplifier, but I have pretty high expectations for these speakers in particular as they're one of Kef's best sellers. Then we have the LSX IIs in a very pretty mineral white finish. These are active speakers, so no amp required. And while these are the smallest speakers I have from Kef, they have a ton of robust tech features that you'll find in many larger and much more expensive models. I'm really excited to give these a test run today, as these would likely be my choice for a smaller desktop setup given their size. And finally, we have the big boys. These are the LS50 Wireless IIs, which came in this carbon black finish. These are very similar to the Metas, but the Wireless 2 version is active, so the amplifier is built in, and these come with a ton of extra connectivity features. These are still very much hi-fi loudspeakers, but the ease of use and the software package included with this set of speakers is what sets them apart and makes them the priciest speakers on today's list. And needless to say, there is no way that you can authentically hear what any of these speakers sound like through this video. But when you hear audio in this video, it will be the exact same audio that I'm listening to in the room. So my descriptions of what I'm hearing will match the same track that you're hearing. But regardless, you should not be buying audio gear based solely off of the opinions of a dude on YouTube. So please, after this video, go swing by any Best Buy where you can try all of these out for yourself. All right, let's get started. These are my previous near-field monitors, or just general use studio speakers. And I say previous because neither one of these pairs of speakers work. I'm not going to tell you the models because I'm not recommending them at all, but I will tell you that they're both from M Audio, and I have had horrible luck with M Audio. Both of these speakers lasted between 2 and 3 years each before something went wrong. If I remember correctly, one of them had a power supply issue and the other just had a horrible grumbly noise. And I was so frustrated that this happened, past the warranty period, but also still within like 2 or 3 years of buying them at full retail price. And I was so frustrated that I didn't even bother to fix them or diagnose them, so they have just been really expensive decorations sitting on my mixing desk. So, needless to say, I'm excited to get these things out of my studio and at the very least get some functional speakers at my mixing desk, because for the last couple years I've been mixing using iMac speakers. So what I want to do now is record a quick jam over at the drum set. We're going to record it straight into Logic, and I'm going to do a quick mix, then we'll listen back through the Kef speakers just to see how these things might function as near-field monitors, because they are, after all, hi-fi, home theater kind of speakers, but I have high expectations. I think it's going to sound really, really cool. All right, we have a light mix going. First listen of the LS50 Wireless IIs. Let's go. The first thing that comes to mind is my snare drum. There's a lot of extra frequencies that I'm not used to hearing. It's honestly a little clangy, and I wonder if that's just something that doesn't come through on phone speakers, or if these just have that much clarity. So a clangy snare drum is the first thing I hear. And I also noticed that the reverb that I normally have in my mix sounds totally overwhelming with these. It sounds like I'm playing in an auditorium all of a sudden, and I thought my reverb was relatively moderate, and it's not, according to these speakers. Overall, the sound is incredible. It's a lot better than my iMac speakers, but that shouldn't be too surprising. I'm finding that the highs, at least the way that I have them EQ'd now, are a little bit clangy for me, but I don't put that on the speakers. I think the speakers are telling me that my EQ on my overheads, my room mic, any of my close-up cymbal mics, that they're just a little bit too crispy in the EQ, so I'm going to back that down a little bit and try to mix this according to what these speakers are telling me, because I'm hearing a few things that are sort of my fault and certainly not the speakers. Give me 2 minutes. Let me do a quick mix. My ride cymbal sounds so good. That Byzance Foundry Reserve has so many little complexities built into that cymbal, and you can always hear them in the room, but I've never heard them with this level of detail back through the speakers. I think if we're trying to answer the question, can hi-fi speakers like this be used as near-field monitors? I don't see why not. These are incredibly crisp, they're really, really full-bodied. I have no complaints at all about like the boominess of my kick drum or my low toms. Everything is, it's not like growly and rumbly, it's just a really thick, like in your chest kind of feeling, but there's so much clarity, and I think that's really obvious in an expensive cymbal like the Byzance Foundry Reserve. It's a really complex cymbal, and I can hear all of those details coming from these. So these are extremely impressive. All right, the track I'm gonna play now is actually one that my buddy Joe Hodgen composed. Joe is a full-time composer, he's also a guitar teacher, and he's written every single, well, almost every single loop that's on OrlandoDrummer.com. A lot of you guys have met Joe before. I've been working with him for years. So this is a song that he composed for a film, and I actually helped play drums on this. So my drums are in this mix, but obviously as a composer, he does really complex, in-depth mixes using a lot of instruments that I'm not used to hearing. So he sent over quite a few tracks that I'm going to use throughout this video. Here's one of them. The word overwhelming comes to mind. Like, the sound coming out of these is just so massive. It makes me want to put these in more of a home theater kind of setting, or at least just turn the studio into a listening room. Just an absolutely massive sound coming out of these, especially when you get like the violins and the choir and everything that Joe used in this particular track. We're gonna use some more of his tracks to play through, you know, all of these different speakers, but just a massive, huge, overwhelming sound coming out of these LS50 Wireless IIs. now we have the LSX IIs rigged up as my near-field monitors. We're going to hear just another drum mix, and I still have those mix changes that I made from the LS50 Wireless IIs. I still have those saved in the mix, so this is the exact same mix that I last heard of my drums on the LS50 Wireless IIs, now on the LSX IIs. Let's check it out. Definitely a lot more mid-rangey overall. Not in a bad way either. They just have a little bit of a colored profile towards the middle, which definitely adds some presence. The highs are still there. They're not quite as ultra crisp and sharp as the LS50 Wireless IIs, but overall these are still really balanced. And the low end is surprising. That was what I expected to be missing from speakers like these, just because of the size. They're a lot smaller than most near-field monitors, though I have had speakers around this size before and mixed fine with them, but they have a surprising amount of low end. It's not like they sound smaller than the LS50 Wireless IIs. That would probably become a little bit more obvious as we really cranked the volume, but in a mixing environment where my ears are, 3 or 4 feet from the speakers at most, there's no reason to just crank that volume. So at a moderate listening or even just a mixing volume, these are really, really balanced. Just a hair more of that mid-range presence that compared to the larger LS50 Wireless IIs. But overall, these sound incredible. Still really, really crispy. I'm going to toy around with a couple other tracks here just to get a good picture for what these actually sound like, but they definitely passed the drum test. This is another track mixed by Joe Hodgen, a bit cinematic, but some really cool drums and choir sounds in here, so we should get an idea for how thick these LSX IIs can actually get. That particular track really came through these things. It's so weird being in front of such small speakers and hearing so much of like a thick, beefy low end coming out of them. So I might have misspoke when I said these didn't quite have the low end or the body of the LS50 Wireless IIs, but it's probably just a matter of, when you max them out is when you actually hear some of that low end that might be lacking in speakers of these size. But as far as just mixing, there is no reason why I would ever want more low end than these are putting out. That's a weird thing to say for speakers that are somewhere in the ballpark of like 9 inches tall, so incredibly impressive. Now I'm going to jam some more music through these before I make a final verdict on them, but overall these are incredibly impressive for the size, even more impressive than the LS50 Wireless IIs, because given the price tag and the size of those speakers, I expected them to be awesome. But when speakers get this tiny, like under a shoebox size, I have a little bit lower expectations, but these are kind of blowing my mind right now. So let's jam a few more songs and see where we're at. Now they're advertised as bookshelf speakers, and they would make, dude, I'm trying to, the audio, it's a whole thing. These are the Q350s. Now Kef advertises these as bookshelf speakers, and I think they would make awesome bookshelf speakers if I had a bigger bookshelf, or at least one that wasn't totally filled up, because I couldn't get these fit in anywhere on this bookshelf. But I brought over my coffee table and set up this casual little listening area, because personally, this is how I would use speakers like this. I don't think these are intended to be used as mixing monitors or near-field monitors. I think these are more for casual listening environments, so that's kind of what I have set up here. I'm running this through my Fosse audio amplifier, or rather that amplifier is powering these speakers. I haven't touched the EQ just yet. I just want to kick these on now and see what we have right out of the box. first impressions, these are really warm, like way warmer than the LSX IIs or the LS Wireless 50s that I've tried so far, like way warmer. I want to try music that is not electronic, something a little bit more organic, because I feel like there's, I don't know, a lot of musicality to these, so I want to hear some real instruments. Definitely the most musical so far. These have a lot of character to them. They're not fully flat across the EQ. There's a lot of like breathiness in there, but I don't know, somewhere in like the upper mids, not where it's crispy, not super high, but somewhere in those, the mid-range to the upper mids, there's a lot of like breathiness in there. Very like warm musical speakers. Let me try another track. These are really cool. So that's kind of what I expected. When I put on a heavier song, that was Wet Texan by me and Nick DiPiero, and that's a mix that I'm really familiar with. It's just a little bit on, I don't want to call it muddy or cloudy, but it definitely loses some clarity because these speakers seem to have such a warmer kind of mid-range that when you put in these thick mixes, it really, I don't know, it sort of like clogs up what these speakers are meant to do. So my first impression is that these are just for more airy, natural sort of mixes. When you get into modern thick mixes, like that wall of sound, especially in metal, and probably in EDM and dubstep, it's a little bit heavy-handed for these speakers. But as I soften the music or pick mixes that are just a little bit more spaced out, these things really come to life. So yeah, probably not for metal and heavier genres, but almost everything else that I've tried, you know, the more spacious the mix, the better it sounds through the Q350s. These things are awesome. These are the LS50 Metas. Now this is the second generation of this particular speaker, and from everything I've read online, these are by far the most popular and well-received KEF speakers. And I'm really curious why that is, because they lack a lot of the functionality that some of the wireless models do. So the LS50 Wireless II, it's basically these with an amp built in and then a huge software package. That's why they're so much more expensive. Then there's the LSX II, which admittedly is much smaller, but again, tons of functionality. And as you can see on the back of these speakers, it's basically just two inputs for speaker wire, and that's it. So my thought initially is that these are meant to be customized, right? You're supposed to pair this with an amplifier of your choosing, ideally one that's, you know, really high end, and you could ideally get these to sound however you want. So my thought is that these would be ideal for a home theater setup where you really want to customize the sound by using whatever amplifier you choose. So with all that said, let's just give them a shot and see what they sound like. I'm not hearing a crazy color profile. They kind of sound, I don't know, super flat, which is what you'd want for like reference monitors. Very flat, not overwhelmingly boomy, not super crispy, crazy high end, like very balanced overall. But that was just a lot of acoustic guitar. Let's try another track. these definitely have a lot of presence to them. Like once you wake them up, just like the LS50 Wireless IIs, they have a lot of weight and beef to them. Not that it's necessarily bottom heavy in like an EQ way, like it's not that the lows stand out, they're just loud. They have a big presence to them. But again, still relatively flat overall. It's really impressive how these don't have much color at all. But let's go through some tracks and make sure that's the case. We're gonna try some different genres here. Definitely the most flat sounding speakers that Kef sent me, and I mean that in a good way. They have no coloration that I can pick up on. Like if I were to go to touch an EQ to try and adjust this, I'm not sure where to start because I'm not really correcting a problem. I'm just hearing the track exactly as it left the mixing engineer's computer last, right? It actually sounds like how the song was intended to sound, and it doesn't feel like this speaker has a preference in any direction. Now keep in mind, that's not always what you want. You know, starting out flat is a really good place to start, but if I were keeping these speakers, and these were gonna be my personal listening speakers, whether that's for music, podcasts, or a home theater setup like with a TV, I would probably create some different EQ profiles on my amplifier, depending on what I'm listening to or what I'm watching. Now the main reason I wouldn't want to use these inside of my studio as near-field monitors or to mix on, it's not because they're not flat. That would actually be awesome. It's more so that I don't want to deal with the hassle of having an external amplifier among all of my interfaces, external compressors. I have an ADAT unit. Like it's just a really busy mixing desk. And so having an audio amplifier running into these speakers, it's just an extra step that I'm not interested in taking. But if I was being really objective about which speakers sonically would be best for mixing on, it's probably these. They are unbelievably flat. And I think in an ideal situation, you would have an amplifier that also didn't have a lot of coloration to it. So you were really maintaining this transparent setup sort of from start to finish. Your amplifier and your speakers are as flat as humanly possible. Because to me, as good as these sound, as high quality as the sound is, the most impressive thing about them is that they don't have any color. They're just very honest, and I absolutely love that. My instinct to put these here, I think, was partially correct, but you know, as I talk this out, I really could see them having a good function inside of the studio. At the end of the day, these are going back to Kef, so they're not staying here. I also think my wife would probably murder me for putting royal blue speakers on top of our green console, so that's not gonna work. But you know what would work here are the LSX IIs, and as small as those are, they would actually fit underneath my TV a little bit better. Let's give it a shot. Of course, we had to do our mandatory Mario Kart test. If these are gonna live in any living room, they have to sound good through a Nintendo Switch, and they do. To be honest, they're not sounding any different than they did in the studio. You know, obviously they're set up as near-field monitors out in the studio, so the application's a little bit different. But in here, they sound great. They're really full, they're plenty loud. They are small enough where I could see adding a subwoofer as an option. You know, when you're in the LS50s, whether it's the Meta or the Wireless IIs, they're so big that you can feel the vibrations of them. But when you get the size of the speaker down so small like these LSX IIs, you do lose some of that rumble, which you want for video games or just watching like an action movie, for example, or a horror movie. It's really nice to feel that sub rumble. And I normally do have a subwoofer rigged up to a soundbar here, so I'm kind of missing some of that real low end that you would want from video games, horror movies, action movies, that sort of stuff. But low end aside, I really like how well these fit here. You know, I'm not the kind of person that's gonna have a 40-pound speaker on either side of my TV. It's just a little bit too overwhelming, and it's a tough sell for a lot of wives and girlfriends who are more aesthetically minded, where, a lot of guys, drummers especially, would just slap two giant speakers on stands on either side of the TV. We're drummers, we don't really mind big things. But I think these look better and fit better here. Now, these come in 4 different color options, but I love this mineral white. It's a really cool color. I think it looks really pretty and cute, just kind of tucked inside of there, and I might add a subwoofer if I was gonna commit to this exact setup. But overall, the sound quality is excellent. These are more than suitable for any sort of home theater, TV, living room kind of setup. They sound great. A huge thank you to Kev for sending me these 4 sets of speakers to try out. 3 of them are now boxed up and ready to go home. And in case you're wondering, I did decide to keep the LS50 Wireless IIs, which are going to be used as my studio monitors moving forward. This was a tough call between the LS50s and the LSXs, because the smaller size speakers could easily work in my living room or a bookshelf or plenty of other places that I was kind of tempted to put them. But realistically, I'm not going to be moving any speakers around more than necessary. That's how you damage stuff, right? So the Wireless 2s were the best choice for me, especially since they're going to live right here at my mixing desk. If you want to learn more about Kef and all of their awesome hi-fi audio products, check out the link in the description. Thank you for watching, guys. Adam here, the Orlando Drummer, and I will catch you in the next one. Later.